The moon was a cold, white eye in the sky, watching the moment my heart died. I stood in the shadows of the ancient oak trees, my claws digging into the rough bark until it crumbled. I am Silas, the alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, the strongest wolf to ever lead these lands. But in this moment I felt like a small, broken pup. I watched her. Clara, my mate, my everything, the girl I had pushed away to save my kingdom. She was standing in the clearing, the moonlight dancing off her golden hair. But she wasn't alone. Jax, a warrior from the rival Sun Fang pack, had his hands on her waist. I watched him lean in. I watched his lips touch hers. The world went silent. My blood turned to fire. My wolf, the beast inside me, let out a roar that shook the very ground. I didn't care about the peace treaty anymore. I didn't care about the laws of the elders. I wanted to tear the world apart. I wanted to burn everything to the ground just to hear her say my name again. But I was the one who had told her to leave. I was the one who said I didn't want her. Now, seeing her in the arms of another man, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. And God help anyone who stood in my way of getting her back. The air in the great hall of the Silver Moon Pack usually smelled of cedar and wood smoke, but tonight it felt heavy with the scent of old secrets and coming storms. I sat on my stone throne, my hand gripping the armrest so hard the rock began to crack. 3 months. It had been 3 months since I looked Clara in the eyes and told her the biggest lie of my life. I remember the way the rain soaked her thin dress that night. I remember how her bottom lip trembled when I said the words, "I, Silas, Alpha of the Silver Moon, reject you as my mate." I had to do it. The Shadow Pack had sent a message. They had captured our scouts. They told me that if I took a mate, if I brought a Luna into the pack, they would descend upon us and kill every woman and child in the territory. They knew Clara was my weakness. To save my people, I had to break her heart. I had to make her hate me so she would run away, far from the borders where she would be safe. I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was being a king. But sitting here now, in the silence of my cold, empty palace, I knew I was just a fool. The bond between werewolves is a magic thing. It is a golden thread that ties 2 souls together across the world. When I rejected her, I felt that thread snap. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out my lungs. For weeks I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My wolf, the giant black beast that lived inside my skin, wouldn't speak to me. He paced in the back of my mind, growling, mourning the loss of his queen. I told myself the pain would go away. I told myself the pack was more important than my own happiness. But then the rumors started. "She's at the border," my beater Marcus had whispered to me this morning. He looked worried. Marcus knew how much I was hurting, even if I tried to hide it behind a mask of stone. "She's staying with the Sun Fang pack, Silas, and people say she's not alone. They say she's found someone else." That was the moment the world started to tilt. Jealousy is a poison. It's a green snake that wraps around your throat and squeezes until you can't think straight. I didn't wait for Marcus to finish. I shifted into my wolf form, my bones snapping and reforming in seconds, my clothes tearing as my fur burst through. I ran. I ran through the ancient forests, my paws hitting the dirt like drums. I crossed the boundary lines I had sworn to protect. I didn't care about war. I didn't care about treaties, I only cared about her. And that brought me here, to the edge of the clearing, watching the girl I love kiss a man who wasn't me. Clara pulled back from the kiss, her eyes wide. She looked toward the trees, toward where I was hiding. Even though I was downwind, she could feel me. The bond was broken, but the memory of it remained. She looked beautiful. Her skin was pale against the dark woods, and she looked stronger than when I left her. She wasn't the crying girl in the rain anymore. She was a woman who had survived a broken heart. "Who's there?" Jax called out, stepping in front of her. He shifted his weight, his muscles tensing. He was a good warrior, but he was nothing compared to an alpha in a rage. I stepped out from the shadows. I didn't shift back into my human form. I stayed as the wolf, a massive 600-pound monster with eyes like glowing coals. I let out a low growl that made the leaves on the trees shiver. Jax flinched. He knew who I was. Everyone knew the alpha of the Silver Moon. "Silas," Clara's voice was a whisper, but it cut through me like a silver blade. She stepped out from behind Jax, her eyes searching mine. "What are you doing here? You told me never to come back. You told me you didn't want me." I wanted to tell her I was sorry. I wanted to tell her about the threats, the Shadow Pack, and the impossible choice I had to make. But seeing Jax stand so close to her, seeing his hand brush against hers, the words died in my throat. All I could feel was the need to claim what was mine. I stepped closer, my teeth bared. "Stay back, Silas," Jax warned, his voice shaking. "She's under the protection of the Sun Fang now. You rejected her, you have no right to be here." I shifted then. The change was fast and painful, but I didn't make a sound. I stood before them naked and powerful, the moonlight catching the scars on my chest. I didn't look at Jax. I only looked at Clara. Right, I said, my voice sounding like grinding stones. I am the alpha of these lands. I have the right to anything I want. You don't have the right to me, Clara said, her voice growing stronger. She didn't look away, she didn't flinch. You broke me, Silas, you threw me away like I was nothing. Jax was there to pick up the pieces. He's the one who kept me alive when I wanted to give up. Every word she spoke was like a punch to my gut. I looked at Jax and the rage flared up again. Is that what he is, a scavenger, taking what I discarded? Jax growled, his eyes flashing yellow. I love her, Silas, something you clearly never did. I moved so fast they didn't even see it. I had Jax by the throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against a tree. The wood cracked under the impact. I could feel his heartbeat fluttering against my palm like a trapped bird. One squeeze, that's all it would take. One squeeze and the man who touched my mate would be gone forever. Silas, stop, Clara screamed. She ran over and grabbed my arm, her small hands pulling at my muscles. Don't do this. If you kill him, you start a war, you'll destroy everything you tried to save. I looked down at her. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they weren't tears of love. They were tears of fear, fear of me. That realization hit me harder than any physical blow. I let go of Jax. And he slumped to the ground, gasping for air. I stepped back, my chest heaving. I looked at my hands, the hands that were meant to protect her, and saw how easily they could destroy her happiness. You're right, I whispered, my voice breaking. I did this, I sent you away, I broke the world and now I have to live in the ruins. I turned to walk away, but then I stopped. I looked back over my shoulder, my eyes cold and determined. But understand this, Clara. And you, Jax, I might have rejected the mate bond, but I will never reject the woman. I chose the pack once, I will never make that mistake again. If the Shadow Pack wants to fight, let them come. If the Sun Fang wants to hide you, let them try. I am going to win you back, Clara. Even if I have to burn every kingdom to the ground to do it. I shifted back into my wolf form and vanished into the night, leaving them trembling in the moonlight. But as I ran, I heard a sound that stopped my heart. It was a howl. Not a wolf howl, but the horn of the Shadow Pack. It was coming from the direction of my village. Smoke began to rise over the trees in the distance. The orange glow of fire started to lick the horizon. They hadn't waited for me to take a Luna. They had attacked anyway. I realized then that my sacrifice had been for nothing. I had lost my mate, and now I was losing my home. I looked back toward the clearing where Clara stood. She was looking at the fire, her face pale with horror. The cliffhanger hung heavy in the air. My pack was dying, my mate was in the arms of my enemy, and the war I had tried so hard to avoid had just begun. I had two choices: stay and protect the girl who hated me, or run and save the people who depended on me. Before I could decide, a group of dark, hooded figures stepped out from the brush, surrounding Clara and Jax. They weren't werewolves, they were something much worse. They were the hunters of the Shadow Pack, and they weren't there to talk. One of them raised a silver crossbow, aiming it directly at Clara's heart. Silas, she screamed, her voice echoing through the trees. I leaped her. The silver bolt cut through the night air like a falling star, but it brought no wishes, only death. I didn't think. An alpha doesn't think when his mate is in danger, he only moves. I threw my massive wolf body through the air, my fur catching the light of the moon one last time before the pain exploded in my shoulder. The bolt sank deep into my muscle. Silver, it felt like liquid fire was being poured into my veins. It felt like 1,000 bees stinging me all at once, their venom turning my blood into lead. I crashed into the dirt at Clara's feet, a whimper escaping my throat that I couldn't hold back. Silas, Clara screamed. She fell to her knees beside me, her hands hovering over my fur, afraid to touch the burning metal. I shifted back to my human form immediately. It was the only way to get the bolt out. My bones snapped and groaned, the silver making the transformation a living nightmare. I lay in the grass, gasping for air, sweat dripping down my face. I looked up and saw the Shadow Pack hunters stepping closer. They wore black cloaks that smelled like rot and old grav. Their leader, a man with a scarred face named Malachi, stepped forward with a cruel smile. The great Silas, Malachi hissed, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on a tombstone. The alpha who gave up his heart to save his skin, and look at you now, bleeding in the dirt for a girl you said you didn't want. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly. Jax stepped forward, his claws out, his eyes glowing a bright, angry yellow. Get away from them, Jax growled. He stood over Clara and me, trying to be the hero I failed to be. Malachi laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. You think a pup from the Sun Fang can stop us? We have already turned the Silver Moon village into a graveyard. Silas's people are screaming his name and he isn't there to hear them. He's here chasing a ghost. The words hit me harder than the silver bolt. My people, my elders, the children I had sworn to protect. I looked toward the horizon where the orange glow was growing brighter. The smoke was thick now, blocking out the stars. I had tried so hard to be the perfect leader. I had sacrificed my own soul, my own mate, just to keep the peace. And for what? For Malachi to wait until I was weak and strike any. Run, I gasped, grabbing Clara's hand. My skin burned where I touched her, the silver still working its way through my heart. Clara, take Jax and run, into the deep forest. They want me, not you. Clara looked at my hand, then up at my face. Her eyes were full of 1,000 emotions, anger, pity, and a tiny spark of the love that used to live there. I'm not leaving you, Silas, she whispered. Not like you left me. How touching, Malachi said, raising his hand. The hunters behind him lifted their crossbows. But I think I'll kill all 3 of you. It makes the story much simpler. Just as Malachi began to lower his hand to give the order to fire, a howl ripped through the forest. It wasn't my howl, and it wasn't Jax's. It was the sound of 100 wolves, a chorus of rage that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Out of the darkness, the rest of the Sun Fang pack exploded into the clearing. They didn't come for me. They came for their warrior, Jax. In the chaos, Jax grabbed Clara's arm. We have to go now. Silas, Clara cried out as Jax pulled her away. I forced myself up. I reached into my shoulder, grabbed the end of the silver bolt and screamed as I ripped it out. The pain was so bright I almost went blind, but I didn't care. I stood up, blood coating my chest, and looked Malachi right in his cold, dead eyes. You burned my home, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You touched my mate. You have no idea what you've started. I didn't wait for him to respond. I shifted, the rage fueling my body, and I didn't run toward the fight. I ran toward the fire. I ran toward my village. The forest was a blur of black and orange. Every breath I took tasted like ash. As I got closer to the Silver Moon territory, the sounds of battle became deafening. I saw my warriors fighting in the streets, their fur matted with blood. I saw the homes of my people collapsing into embers. I saw the fear in the eyes of the young ones. I let out a roar that silenced the entire battlefield. I was the alpha, I was the king of these woods, and even if I was dying from silver poisoning, I would not let my pack fall. I tore through the shadow pack soldiers like they were made of paper. I was a whirlwind of teeth and claws. Every time a shadow fell, I felt a little bit of the hole in my heart fill with ice. But then I saw him. In the center of the village, standing in front of my own great hall, was my beater Marcus. He wasn't fighting. He was standing perfectly still, talking to a man in a black cloak. Marcus looked up and saw me. He didn't look relieved. He didn't look happy to see his alpha. He looked guilty. Marcus, I shifted back, my body trembling with exhaustion. I walked toward him, stepping over the bodies of my friends. What is this? Why aren't you fighting? Marcus looked at the ground. You were distracted, Silas. You were obsessed with her. Ever since the rejection, you haven't been a leader. You've been a ghost. The pack needed a king who was present. Malachi offered us a way to survive. All we had to do was let him in. The world went cold. It wasn't just an attack from the outside. It was a betrayal from the inside. My best friend, my brother, he had opened the gates. He had allowed our people to be slaughtered because I was distracted by the pain he helped me create. I did it for the pack, Silas, Marcus said, his voice trembling. Just like you did. You rejected Clara to save us. I betrayed you to save us. Aren't we the same? We are nothing alike, I growled, stepping toward him. But before I could reach him, a sharp pain blossomed in the back of my head. Everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't in the village anymore. I was in a damp, cold cave. My hands were chained to the stone walls with heavy silver shackles. Every time I moved, the silver bit into my wrists, sending shocks of agony through my body. My wolf was quiet, suppressed by the metal. You're awake, a voice said from the shadows. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my brain. I looked up and saw Clara. She wasn't chained. She was sitting on a stone bench watching me, but she wasn't alone. Jax was standing behind her, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder. Where am I croaked. My throat felt like I had swallowed sand. You're in the neutral lands, Clara said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the warmth I used to love. The Sun Fang found you after the Shadow Pack left you for dead in the ruins of your hall. They brought you here. The pack, I whispered. Is anyone left? A few, Jax said, his voice full of mock pity. But they don't have an alpha anymore. Marcus has taken over. He signed a treaty with Malachi. The Silver Moon Pack is now a vassal to the Shadow Pack. Your kingdom is gone, Silas. I hung my head, the weight of my failure pressing down on me. I had lost everything. My crown, my home, my brothers, and the woman I loved. I looked at the silver chains, the metal that made me a prisoner in my own skin. "Why did you save me?" I asked, looking at Clara. She walked over to me, her footsteps echoing in the quiet cave. She knelt down so she was at eye level with me. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm, and for a second I felt the old spark of the bond flicker to life. "Because I wanted you to see it," she whispered into my ear. "See what?" "I wanted you to see what happens when you choose duty over love," she said, her voice turning sharp. "I wanted you to see me happy with someone else. I wanted you to feel the chains I felt when you cast me out. You thought you were saving the world, Silas, but you only destroyed ours." She stood up and turned toward the exit of the cave. Jax followed her, giving me one last smug look before he disappeared into the light. "Clara, wait," I shouted, the silver searing my wrists as I lunged forward. "Malachi won't stop. Marcus is a fool. They're coming for the Sun Fang next. They're coming for you." She didn't stop, she didn't look back. I slumped against the wall, the silence of the cave closing in on me. I was alone, I was broken. But as I sat there in the dark, I felt something. It was deep inside, past the silver pain, past the heartbreak. It was a low, guttural growl. My wolf wasn't dead, he was just waiting. If they wanted a monster, I would give them one. If they wanted to see a kingdom burn, I would show them the flames. I began to pull against the chains, ignoring the smell of my own burning flesh. I didn't care about the laws of the moon anymore. I didn't care about being a good alpha. I was going to get out of this cave. I was going to kill Marcus. I was going to tear Malachi's heart from his chest. And then I was going to take my mate back, whether she wanted to come or not. Suddenly, the sound of a heavy footstep echoed at the entrance of the cave. I looked up, expecting Jax, but it wasn't Jax. It was a young girl from my pack, her face covered in soot and tears. She was holding a small, rusted key. "Alpha," she whispered, "they're killing the elders. Please, you have to help us." I looked at the key, then at the girl. The fire in my soul turned into a roar. "Unlock me," I said, my eyes glowing a blood red that the world had never seen before. "And tell the Shadow Pack to start praying." The girl stepped forward, her hand shaking as she reached for the lock. But just as the key touched the silver, a dark shadow loomed behind her. A blade of black steel sprouted from the girl's chest. She didn't even have time to scream before she fell to the floor. Standing behind her was Marcus. He held a bloody sword, his eyes cold and empty. "I can't let you do that, Silas," Marcus said, stepping over the girl's body. "The new world doesn't have room for ghosts." He raised the sword to my throat. The cold steel of Marcus's blade pressed against my throat, the metal bite a sharp contrast to the burning fire of the silver chains on my wrists. My beater, my brother, looked down at me with eyes that held no mercy. He had traded his soul for a throne built on the ashes of our home. "I'm doing this for us, Silas," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling despite the weapon in his hand. "You were always too strong for your own good. A king who loves too much is a king who fails. I'm ending your suffering." I looked at the body of the young girl lying between us. She had died trying to save a ghost. A surge of raw, primal alpha energy, something older and darker than the moon itself, exploded in my chest. I didn't care about the silver anymore. I didn't care if the metal melted my skin to the bone. "You didn't save the pack, Marcus," I growled, my voice vibrating with a power that made the cave floor ripple. "You just gave Malachi a bigger cage." With a roar that tore my throat raw, I lunged forward. The silver shackles hissed, the skin on my wrists bubbling and tearing, but I didn't stop. I snapped my arms back with the strength of a dying sun. The ancient stone wall cracked. The bolts holding the chains screamed as they were ripped from the rock. Marcus stumbled back, his eyes widening in pure terror. He hadn't expected me to break the unbreakable. He hadn't realized that a wolf with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. I didn't wait to shift. I tackled him as a man, my fingers digging into his shoulders. We hit the cave floor, rolling through the dust and the blood of the innocent. Marcus swung his sword, the blade slicing a deep line across my ribs, but I didn't feel it. I was a storm of teeth and rage. I gripped his head and slammed it against the stone once, twice, 3 times. "Where is she?" I barked, my eyes glowing a feral, bloody crimson. "Where did Jax take Clara?" Marcus coughed, blood spraying from his lips. He let out a choked laugh. It's too late, Silas, the Sun Fang. They aren't protecting her, they're selling her. Malachi doesn't want your throne. He wants the blood of a true Lunar to complete the ritual. Jax was the lure. My heart stopped, the kiss in the clearing. The protection of the rival pack. It was all a lie. They hadn't saved her because they loved her, they had stolen her because she was the ultimate prize. Jax hadn't picked up the pieces of her broken heart, he had just been waiting to trade them for power. I stood up, the broken silver chains still dangling from my bleeding wrists like grim jewelry. I looked at Marcus, the man I once trusted with my life. He lay broken on the floor, gasping for air. I should kill you, I said, my voice cold and hollow. But I want you to live. I want you to watch as I tear down everything you tried to build with your betrayal. I turned and ran out of the cave, shifting mid-stride. My wolf form was larger than before, my fur matted with dried blood and soot, my eyes two beacons of death in the night. I didn't head for my village. I headed for the Sun Fang borders. The wind carried her scent. It was faint, lilies and rain, but it was there, laced with the sharp, metallic tang of fear. She was moving fast, headed toward the Black Peaks, the jagged mountains where the Shadow Pack held their darkest rituals. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. I ran until my paws bled. As I crossed into the Sun Fang territory, I didn't hide, I didn't sneak. I tore through their sentries like a shadow through candlelight. Every wolf that tried to stop me was left broken in the dirt. I wasn't an alpha anymore, I was a force of nature. By the time I reached the base of the Black Peaks, the moon was at its highest point. In a clearing surrounded by jagged obsidian pillars, I saw them. Jax was there, holding Clara by her hair. She was struggling, her hands tied with enchanted rope that glowed with a sickly purple light. Malachi stood in front of them, holding a ceremonial dagger made of blackened bone. "Please, Jax," Clara cried, her voice breaking. "I trusted you, you said you loved me." Jax leaned down, his face twisted into a sneer. "Love doesn't win wars, Clara, power does, and Malachi has promised me a kingdom of my own once your blood hits the stone." "The bond never dies," Malachi murmured, stepping toward her. "Silas rejected you, but the magic of the true Lunar still flows in your veins. It is the key to the Shadow Realm. Once I have it, no wolf, no alpha will ever stand against me again." I stepped out from the trees, my wolf form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the clearing. I didn't growl, I didn't roar. I simply walked toward them, the ground cracking beneath each step. Jax looked up, his face turning pale. "How? Marcus said he killed you." I shifted back to my human form, standing tall despite the silver burns and the sword wound in my side. I looked at Clara. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in months I saw the truth. She saw the monster I had become for her. She saw the blood on my hands and the fire in my eyes, and she didn't look away. "I told you, Clara," I said, my voice echoing off the obsidian pillars. "I would burn the world to win you back. I'm starting with them." Malachi narrowed his eyes. "Kill him now." Jax shifted into his golden wolf form and lunged at me, his jaws aimed for my throat. I didn't move until the last second. I caught him midair, my hands gripping his furry neck. The strength in my arms was terrifying. I felt his spine creak. "You touched what was mine," I whispered into his ear. With a sickening snap, I threw the golden wolf aside like a piece of trash. Jax hit a pillar and didn't move again. I turned my gaze to Malachi. The dark sorcerer wolf laughed, raising his bone dagger. "You're too late, Silas, the ritual has already begun. Look at the moon." I looked up, the moon wasn't white anymore. A sliver of deep blood red was creeping across its surface. An eclipse, a shadow eclipse. Suddenly, the ground beneath Clara began to glow. She screamed as the earth itself seemed to pull at her life force beginning to drain into the obsidian. "Stop it," I yelled, rushing toward her. But a wall of black fire erupted between us. Malachi stood on the other side, his eyes turning into pits of darkness. "To save her, you must give up your alpha spark, Silas. You must become a nameless, powerless stray. Will you give up your crown for a girl who hates you?" I looked at Clara. She was fadding, her skin turning grey as the ritual sucked the life from her body. She looked at me and her lips moved. She didn't say, "Save me." She said, "I forgive you." The wall of fire roared higher. I had a split second to decide, keep my power and let her die, or jump into the flames and lose everything I was. I didn't hesitate, I dived into the black fire. The black fire didn't burn my skin, it burned my soul. It felt like jumping into a river of solid ice. The moment the dark flames wrapped around me, I felt the beast inside my chest let out a final, agonizing howl. The alpha spark, the ancient magic that made me stronger, faster, and invincible, the power that had been passed down through generations of Silver Moon kings, was being ripped out of my veins by its roots. It was an unbearable pain, like having my very bones crushed into dust. I saw flashes of my life as a wolf. I saw myself running under the full moon, feeling the wind in my fur. I saw myself howling from the highest cliff, claiming the night as my own. And then, one by one, those memories turned to ash. The connection to the moon went completely silent. The giant, powerful wolf that had always lived in my mind simply closed his eyes and faded into nothing. I hit the obsidian stone floor of the clearing, gasping for air. The black fire vanished with a loud crack like thunder. I was empty. The crushing weight of the power was gone, leaving me feeling terrifyingly light, weak, and frail. I was just a man. I had no claws. I had no healing magic. If I got cut, I would bleed. If I fell, I would break. But as I lifted my heavy head, I saw her, Clara. The sickly purple ropes of magic that had tied her to the stone altar shattered into a million pieces. The ritual was broken. My sacrifice had shattered Malachi's dark spell. She collapsed onto the cold stone, coughing and shivering. I didn't care that my muscles screamed in protest. I didn't care that every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. I dragged my heavy human body across the jagged floor until I reached her. I pulled her into my arms, pressing her cold face against my chest. She was so small, so fragile, but holding her felt like holding the entire universe. "Clara," I choked out, my voice raw and cracking. "Clara, please look at me." Her beautiful eyes fluttered open. They were wide with shock and confusion. She reached up with a trembling hand and touched my face. She didn't feel the burning heat of an alpha anymore. She only felt the cold sweat of a normal, broken man. "You fool," she cried, the tears spilling over her eyelashes and cutting clean paths through the dirt on her cheeks. She gripped my torn shirt, burying her face in my neck. "Silas, why did you do that? You lost everything. I can feel it. The bond, it's completely silent. You're not an alpha anymore. You have no power." I held her tighter, resting my chin on top of her head. The smell of her hair, lilies and rain was the only thing keeping me anchored to the earth. "I lost everything the night I told you to leave," I whispered, the painful truth finally pouring out of my broken heart. "A crown is just a piece of metal, Clara. A pack is just a group of people. But you are my heart. I couldn't live in a world where my heart stopped beating. I am so sorry, I was arrogant. I thought I could carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I was just a coward who was too afraid to fight for the woman he loved. I would give up 1,000 alpha sparks just to hear you breathe." She pulled back slightly, looking deep into my eyes. The anger and the betrayal that had hardened her face for months began to melt away, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking sadness. "I thought you hated me," she whispered. "I thought I wasn't good enough for a king." "You were too good for me," I said, wiping a tear from her cheek with my thumb. "You always were." A slow, wicked clap echoed through the clearing, shattering our fragile moment. Malachi pulled himself up from the dirt. The shockwave of my sacrificed power had knocked him across the clearing, but it hadn't killed him. His dark cloak was torn, and his scarred face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He picked up the bone dagger from the ground, the dark magic swirling around the blade like black smoke. "How beautifully tragic," Malachi sneered, spitting blood onto the obsidian floor. "The great king of the Silver Moon is now nothing but a weak, pathetic stray. You gave up your fangs for a girl who doesn't even belong to your pack anymore. You gave up your kingdom for a moment of romance." He began to walk toward us, his yellow eyes locking onto mine. "And the best part is you still lose. The ritual was interrupted, yes. But I don't need magic to kill a human and a broken girl. I will carve your hearts out with my own hands." I pushed Clara behind me and stood up. My legs shook violently. The wound Marcus had given me in the cave was bleeding freely again, soaking my shirt in warm crimson. I reached deep inside myself, instinctively calling for the beast, calling for the monster that had always protected me. But there was nothing. The well was completely dry. I was completely alone in my own mind. I raised my bare fists anyway. I would fight him as a man. I would die as a man, defending my mate to my very last breath. Malachi laughed. It was a cruel, booming sound that shook the trees. He didn't even bother shifting into his wolf form. He moved with supernatural speed, closing the distance between us in a blink. He swung his heavy fist, and it connected with my jaw. The force of the blow was like being hit by a falling boulder. I flew backward, crashing hard against a stone pillar. My vision flashed bright white, and the metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. I heard my own ribs crack. I crumpled to the ground, gasping, unable to draw air into my lungs. Silas, Clara screamed. Malachi stood over me, raising his boot. He stomped down hard on my chest. I let out a choked cry as the pressure threatened to crush my heart. "Look at you," Malachi whispered, leaning down so I could smell the rot on his breath. "You are nothing. History won't even remember your name." He raised the dark bone dagger high above his head, aiming it straight for my throat. "Leave him alone." The voice didn't sound like Clara. It sounded like a choir of ancient spirits. It echoed off the mountains, vibrating with a power so pure and intense that the very air began to hum. Malachi froze, the dagger hovering an inch from my skin. We both looked up. Clara wasn't running. She wasn't hiding behind the rocks. She was standing tall, her golden hair whipping violently in a wind that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The blood dripping from her wrists, where the magical ropes had cut her, began to glow. But it wasn't the sickly, dark purple of Malachi's magic. It was a blinding, pure, radiant silver. My sacrifice hadn't just saved her life. The collision of my ancient alpha energy with her dying spirit had awakened something deep inside her, the power of a true Luna. It was an old magic, a magic that hadn't been seen in the werewolf world for 1,000 years. It was the magic of the moon itself, raw and untamed. "Impossible," Malachi hissed, taking a step back from me, lifting his arm to shield his eyes from the blinding light radiating from her skin. "You are a rejected mate. You have no pack, you have no power." Clara raised her hands. Her eyes were completely white, glowing like twin stars in the dark night. "I am Clara of the Silver Moon," she said, and her voice struck the ground like lightning. "And I reject you." A massive beam of pure moonlight erupted from her hands. It tore through the dark clearing, blasting Malachi squarely in the chest. The dark sorcerer screamed a sound of pure agony as the light burned through his dark magic, lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward. He crashed through one of the giant obsidian pillars with a deafening crack. The massive stone column shattered into thousands of razor-sharp pieces, shaking the entire mountain foundation. But Clara didn't know how to control it. The power was too ancient, too massive for her mortal body to hold. She let out a terrifying scream as the silver light began to consume her from the inside, burning her skin. She fell backward, her hands clutching her head. "Clara," I yelled, pushing myself off the ground, ignoring the shattered ribs and the blinding pain in my head. The mountain couldn't handle the release of that much ancient magic. The ground beneath us began to violently groan and shake. The black peaks were literally tearing themselves apart. A massive, jagged crack opened in the earth, splitting the clearing in half with a sound like a bomb going off. A dark, bottomless abyss yawned open right beneath Clara's feet. The edge of the cliff crumbled. She slipped. "Silas," she screamed, her eyes returning to their normal color, wide with absolute terror. Her fingers clawed desperately at the crumbling dirt as she slid over the edge into the black void. I threw my broken body forward. I slid on my stomach across the shaking ground, reaching the edge of the newly formed cliff just as she fell. I shot my arm out and grabbed her wrist. The sudden jolt tore through my shoulder socket. My human muscles screamed in absolute agony. I gritted my teeth, blood pouring from my mouth as I tried to pull her up. But I didn't have the alpha strength anymore. I couldn't lift her. I couldn't even hold my own weight. The rocks beneath my stomach began to give way. The cliff was collapsing. I was slipping down with her. I looked down into her tear-filled eyes. Below her was nothing but endless, terrifying darkness. Above us, the mountain was falling apart. "Let me go, Silas," she cried, dangling over the abyss. "You can't hold me, you're going to fall too." "I am never letting you go again," I roared, my fingers slipping slightly against her wrist. The ground beneath my chest cracked loudly. A massive chunk of the cliff broke away completely. For a split second, we were suspended in the air. We looked into each other's eyes, our fingers locked together in a death grip. And then we were both falling into the dark. The wind screamed in my ears like a dying animal as we fell into the dark. I pulled Clara against my chest, wrapping my arms tightly around her small body. I didn't have my thick alpha fur to protect her. I didn't have my rapid healing. If we hit solid rock, we would both break into a million pieces. I closed my eyes, buried my face in her golden hair, and prayed to the moon goddess for the first time in my life. I didn't pray for myself. I only prayed for her. We didn't hit stone, we hit water. The impact felt like being struck by a wall of solid ice. The breath was knocked completely out of my lungs. The freezing black water closed over my head, dragging us down, down, down into the belly of the mountain. My human muscles instantly cramped. The pain in my shattered ribs flared so hot I thought I was going to pass out. I let go of Clara in the violent crash, and panic set in. I kicked my heavy legs, fighting against the dark currents. Without my wolf strength, the water felt as thick as mud. My lungs burned for air. Just as my vision started to go black, a strong hand grabbed the collar of my torn shirt. We broke the surface together, gasping and choking on the freezing water. It was an underground river, rushing fast and angry through a massive, dark cave. "Silas, swim," Clara yelled over the roar of the water. She wasn't waiting for me to save her, she was pulling me. The girl I had tried to protect was now dragging my broken, heavy body toward the rocky shore. We hit the edge of the river, our fingers digging into the wet dirt and smooth stones. I crawled out of the water and collapsed onto my back, coughing violently. Every breath was a battle. I was shivering, bleeding, and entirely human. For a long time, the only sound in the cave was our heavy breathing and the rushing water. The cavern was dimly lit by patches of glowing blue moss on the walls, casting a soft, ghostly light over us. I turned my head. Clara was lying beside me, her clothes soaked, her skin pale, but she was breathing. She was alive. The blinding silver magic that had exploded from her in the clearing was gone, leaving her looking like the innocent girl I had fallen in love with all those years ago. "You're crazy," she whispered, her voice trembling from the cold. She slowly pushed herself up and crawled over to me. "You really gave it up. You gave up the alpha spark for me." I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my chest forced me back down with a groan. "I told you I would burn the world for you, Clara. Giving up a little magic was the easy part." She reached out, her cold, wet fingers gently touching the deep cut on my cheek, then moving down to my bruised ribs. Her eyes filled with fresh tears as she saw how badly I was hurt. Without the wolf to heal me, my skin was turning dark purple, and my blood was still flowing. "You're going to die like this, Silas," she said, her voice breaking into a sob. "You are just a man now, you can't fight Malachi, you can't fight Marcus, they will kill you." I reached up and grabbed her hand, pressing her palm against my lips. "Then I will die as a man who loves you. That is a much better death than living as a king who broke your heart." She leaned down, pressing her forehead against mine. I felt her warm tears drop onto my face. In the cold, blue light of the cave, all the walls we had built between us finally crumbled. There was no jealousy. There was no anger. There was only the truth. I wrapped my good arm around her waist and pulled her close. When my lips found hers, it wasn't like the desperate, angry kiss she had shared with Jax in the woods. It was soft. It was broken. It was a promise. The kiss tasted like salt and blood, but it was the sweetest thing I had ever felt. For a moment, the pain in my body completely vanished. I pulled her tighter against me, holding her as if the world outside this cave didn't exist. She kissed me back with a fierce, desperate love, her hands tangling in my wet hair. "I'm sorry," I whispered against her lips. "I am so sorry I sent you away. I was terrified. The Shadow Pack told me they would kill you if I kept you. I thought rejecting you was the only way to keep you breathing." Clara pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "You should have trusted me, Silas. We are mates. We are supposed to fight the monsters together. You don't get to make that choice alone." "I know," I said, my voice thick with regret. "I will never make that mistake again. From now on we fight together, or we fall together." She nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked around the giant, glowing cave. "Where are we?" "The deep tunnels," I said, forcing myself to sit up despite the screaming pain in my ribs. "These tunnels run under the entire ancient forest. The old kings used to use them to travel between the pack lands secretly. If we follow this path, it should lead us straight up into the cellar of my Great Hall." "The Great Hall?" Clara asked, her eyes going wide. "Silas, that is where Marcus is. That is where the Shadow Pack soldiers are. We can't go there, you are injured." "We have to," I said, leaning on her shoulder as I slowly pushed myself to my feet. My legs shook like leaves in the wind, but I locked my knees and stood tall. "Marcus thinks I am dead. He thinks you fell to the bottom of the world. They will be celebrating. They will let their guard down. We have to sneak in, find the elders they locked up, and get them to safety before Malachi returns." Clara looked at my bleeding side and my bruised face. She knew it was a suicide mission, but she also knew the kind of man I was. Even without my claws, I couldn't leave my people to die. She didn't argue. She just wrapped her arm tightly around my waist to support my weight. "Okay," she said softly, her eyes full of bravery. "We go together." We walked for hours. The blue moss guided our way through the twisting, damp darkness. Every step was pure torture. My body felt heavier than lead, and a cold fever was starting to creep into my bones from the infected wounds. But I didn't stop. Clara's warmth next to me was the only fuel keeping my heart pumping. As we walked, we talked. We talked about the quiet days before the war. We talked about the pups we used to dream of having. For a few hours in that dark tunnel, we weren't a broken king and a hunted Luna. We were just Silas and Clara. It was the lowest, quietest moment of my life, but I had never felt more at peace. Eventually, the sound of the rushing river faded away, replaced by something much worse. Drums. Heavy, steady drum beats echoed down the stone corridor ahead of us. We had reached the end of the tunnels. A steep, narrow stone staircase led up toward a heavy wooden trapdoor. Faint orange light spilled through the cracks in the wood. We crept up the stairs. I put my finger to my lips, telling Clara to be absolutely silent. I pressed my ear against the cold wood of the trapdoor. I could hear heavy boots walking on the floorboards above us. I could smell roasted meat, cheap wine, and the foul, rotting scent of the shadow pack wolves. We were right under the great hall. Tonight we celebrate. A voice boomed from above. It was Marcus. He sounded drunk on power. The old king is dead. Silas fell into the abyss and the little girl went with him. The Silver Moon territory now belongs to the new alliance. Tomorrow we execute the old elders and claim this land forever. A roar of cheers and howling shook the dust from the ceiling. I looked back at Clara. Her eyes were hard with anger. She had heard enough. We need a distraction, I whispered, my voice barely making a sound. If I can get out there and draw their attention, you can slip into the dungeon wing and unlock the cells. You still have the key. Clara nodded, pulling the small, rusted key from her soaked pocket, the one the young girl had died trying to give me. Silas, there are dozens of them, Clara whispered back, grabbing my arm. You can't fight them all like this, they will tear you apart. And I don't have to win, I said, giving her a sad, brave smile. I just have to buy you time. Before she could stop me, I pushed hard against the trapdoor. It swung open with a loud creak, hitting the floor above. I climbed out of the cellar and stood in the middle of my great hall. The room went dead silent, the music stopped, the drums stopped. Over 50 werewolves, a mix of traitorous Silver Moon soldiers and scarred Shadow Pack hunters, stared at me in absolute shock. I looked terrible. I was covered in dirt, soaking wet and bleeding heavily onto the polished stone floor. I had no weapon. I had no magic. At the head of the massive wooden table, sitting on my stone throne, was Marcus. His face turned pale as a ghost. The wine cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Silas, Marcus whispered, standing up slowly. Get out of my chair, Marcus, I said. My voice wasn't a powerful alpha roar anymore, but it was cold, steady, and full of a deadly promise. For a second, nobody moved. They were terrified. They thought I was an unkillable god. But then one of the shadow hunters sniffed the air. He smiled, a nasty, yellow-toothed grin. He smells human, the hunter laughed. He lost his wolf, he has no power. The fear in the room instantly vanished, replaced by cruel, mocking laughter. Marcus relaxed, a dark, arrogant smile spreading across his face. He drew the same silver sword he had used to cut me in the cave. You should have stayed dead, brother, Marcus said, stepping down from the throne. He signaled to his men. Kill him slowly. 5 massive shadow hunters shifted into their dark, ugly wolf forms and lunged at me. I didn't have claws, but I still had the mind of a king. As the first wolf leaped, I dropped to my knees, sliding under his jaws. I grabbed a heavy iron fire poker from the hearth as I slid. I spun around and swung the heavy iron bar with everything I had left, smashing it into the second wolf's knee. The bones snapped with a loud crack, and the beast went down howling. The third wolf tackled me from the side. We rolled across the floor. Claws tore through my shirt, ripping deep gashes into my chest. The pain was blinding, but I refused to scream. I shoved the iron poker directly into the beast's throat, throwing him off me. I scrambled to my feet, panting heavily, blood pouring from my new wounds. I had taken down 2, but there were still 48 left, and my vision was starting to blur. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the trapdoor open completely. Clara slipped out, staying in the shadows. She ran silently toward the dungeon doors while everyone was focused on me. Look at the great king, Marcus mocked, stepping closer, swinging his sword, fighting like a desperate rat. A massive fist hit me in the back of the head. I stumbled forward, dropping the fire poker. Before I could recover, another hunter kicked me in the stomach. I crashed to the floor, coughing up blood. The pain was overwhelming. My body was giving up. Marcus walked over and placed his heavy boot on my back, pinning me to the stone floor. I couldn't move. I was completely beaten. Any last words, Stray? Marcus sneered, raising his silver sword.
I didn't need to be a king. I needed to be a monster. Then die! I didn't need to be a king. I needed to be a monster. Then die!
I chose her over life itself, and the moon answered. I chose her over life itself, and the moon answered. I chose her over life itself, and the moon answered.
My heart entirely in half. I don't want the crown anymore, Malachi boomed, his glowing yellow eyes fixing on my broken body on the floor. I just want you to watch her die. The monster raised his other claw, forming a spear of solid black ice, and aimed it directly at Clara's chest. The spear of black ice hung in the air, a jagged needle of frozen darkness aimed at the only heart that mattered. I lay pinned under Marcus's boot, my cheek pressed against the cold stone of my own hall, tasting my own blood and the bitter ash of my failures. I was a man, just a man. No claws to rend, no fur to shield, no magic to call upon. I could hear the heartbeat of the girl I loved, fast, terrified and fadding, as Malachi's shadowy claw squeezed the life out of her. Look at her, Silas, Malachi's voice rattled like 1,000 snakes moving through dry grass. The monster he had become was 10 feet tall, a shifting mass of purple smoke and jagged bone. The true Luna, the light of the world, and she is going to die because you weren't strong enough to be her king. Marcus pressed his boot harder into my back, the silver sword in his hand trembling. I could feel his fear. Even a traitor knows when he has summoned a demon he cannot control. End it, Malachi, Marcus whispered. Kill them both so we can begin the new age. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it evaporated. I had spent my whole life trying to be the perfect alpha. I had followed the laws, I had protected the borders. I had even rejected my own soul to satisfy the needs of the pack. And where had it led me? To the floor of a burning home, watching my world be torn apart. I realized then that the alpha spark wasn't a gift from the moon to be guarded. It was a fire that had to be earned. To win her back, I didn't need to be a king. I needed to be a monster. Marcus, I whispered, my voice thick with blood. Shut up, Stray, Marcus snapped, his boot grinding into my shattered ribs. Marcus, I said again, louder this time. I looked up, meeting his eyes. You said a king who loves too much is a king who fails. You were wrong. A king who doesn't love enough is just a tyrant waiting to be slaughtered. I didn't wait for his response. I used the last of my human strength to reach out and grab Marcus's ankle. I twisted with every ounce of my weight. With a cry of surprise, the traitor lost his balance. As he fell, I lunged upward, my fingers closing around the hilt of his silver sword. The metal burned my human skin instantly. The silver didn't recognize me anymore, but I didn't let go. I welcomed the pain. I fed on it. I drove the silver blade through Marcus's foot, pinning him to the wooden floorboards. He let out a scream that shook the rafters. I scrambled to my feet, my chest heaving, blood dripping from my hands. I wasn't an alpha, but I stood like one. Malachi, I roared, my voice echoing off the stone walls. You want a sacrifice, you want the blood of the silver moon. The shadow monster turned its massive head, the spear of black ice still hovering near Clara's heart. You have nothing left to give, Silas. I have the one thing you'll never understand, I said. I looked at Clara. She was pale, her golden hair matted with soot, but her eyes were fixed on mine. In that look I saw everything we had ever been and everything we could be. I have the truth. I turned the silver sword toward my own chest. The hunters in the room gasped. Even the shadow monster paused. The alpha spark didn't leave me because I was weak, I said, the tip of the blade piercing my skin. It left because it was waiting for me to choose. I chose the pack over her once and the moon took my power. Now I choose her over the world. I choose her over life itself. I didn't hesitate. I drove the silver blade into my own shoulder, right where the hunter's bolt had struck me before. I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was trying to trigger the one thing every werewolf fears, the blood rage. It is a state where the wolf and the human fuse in a fire of pure, suicidal protection. It only happens when a mate is about to die, and it usually kills the one who uses it. The silver in my blood acted like a catalyst. My human heart.
You should have died in that cave, Silas. You should have just let it end.
And let you build a kingdom on the bones of RP people? Let you give Clara to a monster?
No. You killed me, I betrayed you.
You'll cure you must. With a painted symbol of your blood to your blood, we will not de-black you.
Then, what are you going to do with me?
You will find out soon enough.
I strip you of your rank. I strip you of your pack name. You are no longer a wolf of the Silver Moon. You are banished.
Silas, please! The neutral lands, I won't survive the winter alone! Kill me! It's better than being a stray!
You chose to walk in the shadows, Marcus. Now, you will live in them. The other stray.
Silas! Silas, please! I'm your brother! Silas!
They saw their king reborn in fire and let out a howl that shook the very foundations of the kingdom. For the Luna, the elders cried, joining the fray. The battle was short and brutal. The Shadow Pack hunters, seeing their master being unmade by a being of pure light, turned and fled into the night. The traitors who had followed Marcus fell to their knees, begging for mercy that I didn't have the heart to give. I turned my full attention back to Malachi. I didn't want him to just die. I wanted him to be erased. I poured every ounce of my life force, every memory of Clara's smile, every bit of the love I had tried to suppress into my hands. You wanted to see the world burn, I whispered into the monster's ear. Watch. I let the fire go. A massive wave of golden energy exploded from my body, filling the great hall. It didn't burn the wood, it didn't harm the elders, it only sought out the darkness. Malachi was consumed in a pillar of light that reached up through the roof, piercing the night sky. With one final, hollow scream, the sorcerer vanished into nothingness. The light faded slowly. The great hall was quiet, save for the crackling of the hearth and the soft sobbing of the survivors. I felt the golden armor crumble. The heat in my chest flickered and went out. I fell to my knees, my human skin returning, covered in scars and burns. I was more broken than I had ever been. I could feel my life slipping away, the cost of the blood rage finally coming to collect. A pair of soft, warm hands caught me before I hit the floor. Silas, Clara whispered. She was crying, but she was smiling through the tears. She pulled my head into her lap, her touch healing the coldness in my soul. You did it. You came back for me. I told you, I croaked, my vision starting to fail. I would burn the world. The world is still here, she said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. And so are you. She placed her hand over my heart. The silver light of the true Luna began to glow again, but this time it wasn't a weapon. It was a bridge. I felt her magic flow into me, stitching my ribs back together, neutralizing the silver poison and calling the beast back from the edge of the void. Deep in the back of my mind, a massive black wolf opened his eyes. He let out a low, contented purr. The alpha spark didn't just return, it was reborn, stronger and purer than ever before. We were no longer two separate souls fighting the dark. We were one. I reached up and took her hand. The packs, they need a Luna. And a king, she replied. I stood up, supported by the woman who had saved me just as much as I had saved her. We looked out at the ruins of our hall. It was a mess. The roof was gone, the walls were scorched, and many of our brothers and sisters were lost. But as the sun began to rise over the ancient forest, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I knew we would rebuild. Marcus was dragged before us, his face a mask of shame and terror. I looked at him, the man who had been my brother. I didn't feel rage anymore, I only felt pity. Banish him, I said, my voice echoing with the authority of a true alpha. Let him wander the neutral lands as a nameless stray. If he ever sets foot in the Silver Moon territory again, he belongs to the earth. The warriors dragged him away. I turned to Clara, pulling her into my arms in front of the entire pack. I didn't care about the laws, I didn't care about the elders' traditions. I kissed her with everything I had, and this time the entire world watched in silence. The Silver Moon Pack didn't just survive, it thrived. The story of the alpha who burned his own soul to save his mate became a legend that was told for generations. We rebuilt the Great Hall with stones from the Black Peaks, a reminder that even the darkest places can be turned into a home. I sat on the throne, but I wasn't alone. A second throne made of silver and oak sat right beside mine. Clara sat there, her golden hair crowned with moonflowers, her hand always in mine. We were the first of our kind, an alpha and a true Luna ruling as equals. I had rejected her to save the pack, and in doing so I almost lost everything. But I learned that a pack is only as strong as the love that holds it together. I had burned the world to win her back, and in the ashes we found something much better, a kingdom built on the truth. As the moon rose over our lands that night, I let out a howl that was joined by 1,000 others. It wasn't a howl of war or a howl of pain, it was a howl of home. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the Silver Moon Kingdom. If you want more epic tales of alphas, fated mates and supernatural wars, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of our paranormal romance sagas. What should Silas and Clara face next? A new rival? A lost prophecy? Drop your theories in the comments and I might just use them in the next story. Thanks for watching and stay wild.